And go.
Is there a quick fix? I come from the bodybuilding mentality and I was bombarded with something every week that was the next best thing to steroids. Now that topic is faux zempic. Is there a way to lose weight today without having consequences tomorrow or next year? There always is consequences to short-term, looking for short-term gain, trying to find the easy way out. So let's dig into a couple of those potential faux zempic things, tools, tricks that people might be looking at to lose weight today and trying to find the easy way, the shortcut. So, Dustin, you've been looking at a product. There was some, there's several of these out there. We've talked about peptides in the past. Let's look at, really what does it take? Weight really, and the trend, the topic we're going to talk about ultimately is weight is more of a symptom. It's not necessarily the goal, right? So we want to look at what can we do to be healthier today, to be healthier tomorrow and next decade, without, shortcutting and consequently compromising quality of life.
Well,
Mhm.
for those of that who are listening who are struggling with weight, right? You're looking for to lose a few pounds, or you're a practitioner who have a lot of people coming to you with that question. It's not going to go away anytime soon, right?
Right,
You always
right. Mhm.
need somebody coming in saying, just my last call before this was somebody saying, Dustin, I got this 5 to 7 pounds. I can't get rid of it. And they're always looking for this magic bullet or this easy button.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of predatory marketing that happens out there. I'm just going to call it that, right? That's going to overpromise, right, and
Mhm.
underdeliver. And with people seeing the results of people taking these semaglutide shots, right, they're all wanting to be in that boat where they're getting the results, but what they're not paying attention to is at what cost, right? And that's
Right,
what I'm
right.
reminding people. Anytime you're doing something that's a quick weight loss approach, it is at a cost somehow. And like you said in the beginning, this weight is a symptom of something that you're missing for a healthy lifestyle. And if
Mhm.
you do not take care of whatever that is that's missing from your life, whether it's exercise or appropriate diet, any type of faux zempic is only going to be a short-term solution, and then it's going to show up as a major disease state somewhere down the road, right?
Right. Mhm.
So what I want to do today is, Dr. V, when somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, I got to lose some weight," what are the top things that you start to ask them or guide them to be able to move them in the right direction so that they're not damaging themselves, hurting themselves, but they're able to be empowered to start to lose weight?
Right, right.
This one product that was brought to me by many people because it's being marketed, and we can kind of break it down a little bit and talk about it.
Right, right. We can certainly dig into that. For me, it starts with where is the weight gain? So
Mhm.
the location of weight tells a bit of a story. It gives us it's a symptom, right?
Right.
So I mean, a lot of like the product we're about to look at is gut bacteria, and so when the gut is not functioning properly, that's going to be that lower abdominal, that muffin top type of weight gain. The pinch an inch. It's starting to Dunlop over the belt buckle.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's going to be intestinal weight gain. When it's upper abdominal weight, then that tends to be more of a liver problem, and that person's going to have cholesterol issues and toxic, more of a toxic life kind of drinking too much. That stuff, non-fat, well, or alcoholic fatty liver.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the upper abdominal. If it's overall body, or they're simply eating too much, are they just kind of soft and fluffy
Yeah.
all over, right? So
Yeah.
that's eating too much. Is it a carbo belly? Are they just eating too many carbohydrates? I mean, because those carbs are going to get stored, in the early days. I mean, I lived through the what was it, the 80s or the 90s when everybody was fat phobic. You don't want to eat fat because you're going to get fat, right? But it's
Right.
more you eat the carbs, you're going to get fat because 40% of that high carbohydrate meal gets stored as fat. And that's going to be much more devastating to overall health. So let's kind of break it down from some of the, that'll help a person, the listener, understand, okay, I've got the Dunlop, the lower abdominal weight gain. So let's talk about the intestine or focus on that part. So these are all insights to help us know where to direct our energies, our efforts, and our changes to learn ultimately from what the body's trying to tell us. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there definitely should be a focus on the gut and the gut health for sure. And one of the
100%.
things with this product that was brought to me, and somebody asked me, "Hey, is this something that I should do?" Because I want to lose weight like my friends who are on Ozempic. It does have a specific probiotic strain in it that is
Hmm.
worth examining. So I can see where there is some definite value to that that actually adds value to your health overall. And that strain is Bifidobacterium lactis B420. And this was brought to me years ago by a company called Metagenics, actually, who were talking about this. And there's a lot of research on this. And there's a review of all the research in this that we're showing here. And the conclusions do state, oops, it was up here that was highlighted, that there is a benefit. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. It is showing that there is a significant less total body fat mass when we have the right probiotic, right? The caution that I say to people who are just going to go after adding in this probiotic is that, again, is that a long-term solution? Are you doing the things to support the life of that probiotic? So you still want to make sure that you are making the lifestyle changes, adding fibers, all the things that you're going to do to support good gut health, especially if you're going to approach it with something like this. Is that something that I think is worth investigating and maybe introducing to your body? I do think it is. Not everybody needs a specific strain specifically, but it may be something that would be helpful and for that benefit right there.
Right. I mean, Jesus talked about it thousands of years ago, right? Are you going to throw those seeds on the on the cement where it's not going to grow? Or are you going to throw those seeds in fertile soil, right? So
Right.
probiotics is that ultimately, right? If you don't have the good prebiotics to feed that good healthy bacteria, you could take all the healthy great probiotics you want that's been shown to lower weight or lose weight. But if you're, if that's landing on cement, it's not going to grow. So
Right.
we need the good healthy gut environment to repopulate and continue that growth.
Right.
Otherwise, it's for naught taking that
And
stuff.
not exactly is right. And what my concern would be is somebody would do that, they would get a short-term result maybe, and then they would gain weight back, and then they wouldn't think that was beneficial, right? Because they didn't do the other things. And so
Hmm.
with confidence in that. And so that's what's important.
Great
But we're
point.
talking about faux zempics. I think what people are really asking us for, Dr. B, here is how do I keep myself from eating so much, right? There are people who
Mm,
just eat a lot, or they've been
right.
programmed to think that they have to eat 3 meals a day, or they're culturally, been taught to everything's centered around food, and so they are overeating. And I think
Hmm.
why people are getting the results they're getting with things like Ozempic. So when they hear faux Zempic, they think, oh, well, that's going to help curb my cravings, right? That's going to help me
Right.
not want to eat so much.
Hmm.
What are some things that are driving that? The microbiome could be a piece of that, right? The microbiome could be
Absolutely. Right.
making you crave more things, but what are some other things that could be a sign of if you're just not being satisfied? You're just, always hungry.
So, so much to talk about there. I mean, I just had five different podcasts pop into my head with to those last couple of questions. So, I mean, leptin is a hormone that goes up with insulin. It basically parallels insulin blood sugar. That leptin, when they injected rats with leptin, they basically gorged themselves to death, basically. So that leptin is the satisfied hormone. So that hormone tends to go up when we eat, when we overeat. So one of the first easy triggers, if you're trying to lose weight, stop eating at 70 when you're 70% full,
Mhm.
right? So you keep pushing the envelope, you keep trying to get like that fully satisfied feel. That leptin goes up, so you keep having to eat more to get that satisfied feel. So that's part of the mechanism, just to, and that's going to be the person with the kind of overall, the fluffy kind of weight gain. So we want to modulate that. The other aspect is this is part of where the blood type stuff comes into play. If a lot of the side effects of eating an quote avoid type of food, if it's an avoid for your blood type, then you're going to have cravings afterwards. And that's a lot of what really convinced me 20, almost 30 years ago when I started dabbling with the blood type diet that, whenever I'd fall asleep in church and it was like, oops, I ate black beans, and it's like, ooh, felt, that didn't work. Or I'd eat tomatoes and I'd have a really rough night's sleep and or I'd salsa and I'd fall asleep in church. So, that was kind of we'll call it the fall asleep in church mechanism, right?
Not the pastor's fault, right? It's not the
Right. I know the poor pastor takes all the heat for it too. So, I mean, so that's where blood type that, and I'm talking about that every day with patients that, when you get sleepy after a meal, pull out the app for, to figure out what you ate or the book or something to figure out what you ate that basically means that you caused an insulin dump. Something in that meal caused an insulin dump. So for me, for you, chicken's fine. But for me, if I eat chicken, I'm going to go ADD like. I'm going to be unfocused. I'm going to be craving carbs after I eat. So I don't eat chicken. I
Yeah.
cut all those foods out. I have no carbs or sugar cravings. So
Mm.
that's a big mechanism we want to modulate. We want to learn from every single meal that we eat. How did that work for me? Get that out. And then you've got a bunch you want to jump on with there too. But the other thing that you talked about the gut biome, yeast causes carb sugar cravings. So if we're eating too much carbohydrate, yeast goes up. Yeast wants to be fed. So it causes us to crave carbs and sugars. So there's three, huge mechanisms to look at, massive places to start. If any of those really ring true to you as a listener, then, kind of take that deep dive into that mechanism. Mhm.
Well, and if you're looking back at the meals that you're eating, I think that's a really important thing to look at. I've always noticed clinically and learned over years that the people who have enough fat and fiber in their meals, they tend to feel more full, right? Those are the
Satisfied.
that make you feel satisfied. And if your meal is lacking in fat and fiber consistently, you are going to constantly be craving and wanting more things. And it's not going to satisfy your microbiome either, right? So
Right.
they're not the one that you want to have anyway. It's going to satisfy
Mhm.
and continue to push you in that direction. So one of the simplest things that you can really do is examine whether you're getting good healthy fat and fiber in your diet. And most of the people that I talk to who come in for weight loss are definitely missing in those two categories, right? They're
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
low on fiber and they're low on a good healthy fat. They're high in carbs. And so
Right.
it's this thing that keeps these hormones going, which can impact
Right.
things like blood sugar, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's why another one of the ingredients in this product is chromium, right? Which
Mhm. Mhm.
it's an essential mineral that is helpful for the pancreas and it does help with maintaining more normal blood sugar levels. So
Right.
maybe if you do try this product and you get a result, maybe I would first examine whether or not you're getting enough chromium in your diet.
Mhm. Right. Right.
And you would get from good meats and eggs and foods like that. And maybe you're just not eating enough whole foods that contain this mineral chromium.
Right. Yeah, chromium helps resensitize insulin receptors, right? So, when we're not, we've, if when a person's eating too much carbohydrate, they become insulin insensitivity, right? Insulin insensitive. That's the first step. That's the step before heading to diabetes. And that's the sleep, that's the hangries, that's the sleepy after you eat,
Mhm.
that where your body's just not using insulin so much anymore because the cells have just basically turned off to all the insulin that they're being abused by. So chromium will help with that. And that's part of the value of intermittent fasting even will help resensitize insulin receptors some too. So that's kind of, but to get back to on topic, Faux zempic, that is one of the values in the product is the chromium aspect because that will help reduce some of the cravings. And that's an easy fix. And
Mhm.
there's a million products that have good chromium in it.
Faux zempic. Well, but let's point out, we're not picking on this topic. This is just a product that somebody sent to me to ask me about, but it is
Hmm.
in chromium picolinate, right? So
Hmm.
this is a point where I do want to educate people about that there's so many supplements out there that use just this singular form of chromium, and it's definitely the inferior way to do this, right? If you're getting it from food, you're going to get like a trivalent form, you're going to get multiform with other nutrients that balance it out. When you see somebody putting in chromium picolinate, you know that they're reducing it down to what they think is the active thing, and you're going to get some results, but you're definitely going to get inferior results as to what you would do from getting a whole food version of that. Which
Right. Right, right. And I mean, when I look at that list of ingredients, it basically you can see somebody just, went on Google and searched all the nutrients, to lose weight or to curb cravings and threw them into a product. And they did a decent job of, picking. I mean, they picked the active form of the B6, and there's not a lot of excipient, junk, added to it.
yeah,
That, as you talked about, the probiotics, a good one,
yep, the
um,
bifidobacterium.
but again, don't take a product like this and expect to lose 50 pounds overnight and for this to change your life. Ultimately, weight is a symptom. We need to learn from why we're gaining weight, why we're storing extra carbohydrates. Again, when you feel that energy lull after you eat, that means that you just caused an insulin dump, and 40% of that meal is going to be stored as fat. It's going to manifest as excess body weight. It's going to manifest as triglycerides. You know, if you're looking at blood tests, labs, triglycerides are basically cellulite. Think of your body storing those carbs for winter. That's ultimately what triglycerides are. You know, LDLs, the bad, quote, bad cholesterol is oxidized fat. That's, you know, typically from an infection or things like that. That's your body trying to compensate for a hormonal problem. So these things are all signs. It's not the end game. You know, weight loss, yes, it's a sign. I weigh myself. I use a scale to figure out how foods affect me, but I'm not hung up on the number. But it's an indication for me of how the choices I made yesterday ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I mean, it's a challenge for everybody. And we were always trying to look for ways to help move people in the healthy direction. If somebody wants to use this as a short term, get them started, that's what everybody's always asking for. You know,
Hmm.
that's fine. I don't know. I don't think something like this is going to be damaging, but I don't think it's going to definitely give them a long-term result, right? Overall. And it
Right.
comes back to, again, also this craving situation, right? You
Hmm.
mentioned eating until you're 70% full. That's a great idea. And
Hmm.
in like Okinawa, they have what's called hari hachibu, where they do, it's a rule where they actually say before they eat the meal, I'm going to eat till I'm 80% full and then I'm going to walk away, which is kind of a cool way to get that going. But it's easier said than done, right? When you've been in an American
Hmm.
society where we've been taught where you eat as fast as you can, as much as you can, and make sure you clean your plate. You know what I mean?
Right.
We have these
Right.
cultural things to overcome as well. And
Hmm.
I have actually seen people who have come into my clinic who've been on GLP-1s, right? Who've been on these
Hmm.
drugs and did not lose weight
Wow.
because
Hmm.
it wasn't about them being hungry. It was about them having an emotional need to eat.
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
piece that I think a lot of people really need help with. We really have been taught. Well, I was taught to express love with food as a child, right? You go to your grandma
Mm.
because you have
Right.
right, and she wants to. It's a way to try to nourish somebody, but the food that we're giving isn't as nourishing. So, what advice do you give to somebody who's an emotional eater, right? Where do you begin
Yeah.
with that to help them?
Yeah, careful what's going on when you eat, right? Vagus nerve, right, is that's kind of the most parasympathetic, the relax, digest, recover nerve that, goes from the brain to most of the organs in the system. And
Mm.
so when we're stressed, that vagus nerve shut down, so we're not going to digest. So if you go into that meal, angry at your spouse or, frustrated from your day, you're not going to digest that meal very well. You're going to be unsatisfied. So there's that. There's what you're eating is going to make a difference. Carbs, they cause a temporary, carbs and sugar, simple carbohydrates cause a temporary serotonin lift. So
Mm.
that's a hit, right? So if somebody's got toxic metals, like we talked about with David, and the mercury and things that were causing him to have low serotonin, that person is going to crave carbohydrates to get a temporary SSRI sort of feel,
Yeah.
antidepressant. It's going to be like a temporary functional antidepressant for that person. So
Right.
getting that person cleaned up so that they're not blue and looking for a temporary high, if you will, temporary emotional lift, that's going to help. Yeah, again, we've talked about on probably just about every one of these, the vegetables, the minerals in organic vegetables help make us more rock-like than sponge-like. So when our system, our body's functioning well, those emotions are going to bounce off. They're going to reflect. We're not going to take them on, store them, and own them, if you will. Whereas when we're eating simple carbohydrates, we're going to be deficient in B vitamins, deficient in minerals, so we're more prone to store. And as a clinician, that's what makes chronic illness rough, is because that person's now had 10, 20 years of emotional baggage just gets stuffed away instead of being able to deal with it appropriately. So diet affects the way that we think and feel as well in a huge way.
Definitely. I mean, all of that, there's so much to unpack here. And it really is important to have somebody to help kind of be a detective to help you figure out what is the driver. And
Hmm.
if it is something emotional, I find that it's really important also because it's really hard to resist something, right? If your go-to to help you self-soothe is food,
Hmm.
instead of saying, well, you can't do that, right? Stop self-soothing with food. What are they going to do? You got to give them something to do, right?
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
can find something that is doable and that is going to give some type of self-soothing that doesn't involve food and program yourself to try to make that your first choice going forward. That's another thing that's going to help really empower you beyond the emotional piece of it. personally, is what I see help.
Right, right, right. Again, count the costs, right? Take take a breath before you sit down, Think, it's kind of like pause before you respond or react to your spouse, That's the old
Right.
bite the tongue sort of mentality.
Mhm.
Which is huge because I mean it's so many people want to, I'm starving. I need, something, I need calories now. Just count the cost. Ultimately, you keep making those bad choices, it's going to, it's pound over pound. It's the person that continues to gain weight over the years. Whereas for me, I'm addicted to feeling good and being my best, and so that stuff really, when I understand the consequence of eating sugar or eating, fried foods and how long it takes to digest and how lousy I feel all the next day, it's not even attractive to me anymore. That stuff, it has no emotional hit anymore.
Mhm. But it takes a while to kind of evolve to the level of perfection that you live your life at, Dr. V. But there are us humans out there who still find it tempting. It is important to, I mean, there's so much we can do, as I guess is what I'm saying. And it is important to have
Right.
the knowledge of what it is that's driving that. And if it's emotional, it's emotional. But
Mhm.
there are things that, again, that is a symptom, right? That something
Mhm.
should be addressed from an emotional standpoint as well.
Right. Right.
Because that's going to, again, express itself in a different way down
Hmm.
the line as well. Yeah. Now, this isn't to say, I mean, I think we're being specific today about the people who overeat, right? Because there are so many
Okay.
other, like you said, there's the gut that hangs over and that's why when people are reaching for a faux zempic, it's because they're looking for something to suppress their appetite a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not to say that there aren't other causes of weight gain, right? For example, the lady I spoke to earlier today, you could have 1 minute conversation with her and know that it's high cortisol, right? Because she is
Hmm.
oh, right, and
Hmm.
she's overworking out and she's wearing a weight vested everywhere she goes, and you know what I mean. So you're
Hmm.
not going to be able to lose that weight until you find that balance in your life. But for those who are looking for a faux zempic, the other thing I think is important for people to understand is that your hypothalamus is what's helping support your level of appetite, right? It helps to either have an appropriate appetite response. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, well, HPA axis, right? Hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. So you just made a perfect example of the cortisol junkie, right? And I'm a go-getter just like the rest. I want to push, burn, make it happen, change the world. So that's all cortisol getting us up out of bed and making a difference. So then, yeah, that desensitized hypothalamus. So then the feedback loop gets compromised, and temperature regulation goes off. Our satiety, our happiness, our yeah, contentness.
It's what I'm trying to say too is that my concern over people who are taking those drugs or a faux Zempic is that
Hmm.
it may be confusing the signaling from your hypothalamus, right? Like
Right.
if you're on one of the drugs, full stop, you need to reset your hypothalamus, right? Right?
Hmm.
Like getting all kinds of nonsensical information and it's confused, right? It's like
Right.
I explained it to some military person who came to my clinic the other day. I'm like, you have a military base with air traffic control, and you have all these commercial flights landing there, right? When you throw these exogenous
Mm.
hormones in there, it confuses that hypothalamus, and it doesn't know what's going on. And then going forward, you don't know if you're hungry or if you're not, right? You could be
Hmm.
really hungry or not having any appetite at all because it's so confused. So if
Hmm.
you're doing even an Ozempic or a faux Zempic, then at some point it's going to be very important to address your endocrine system in a healing way because it's going to be messed up.
Right.
Are you with me on that, or did I totally?
100%. No, I was gonna say
Okay,
rebuild the pancreas too. I mean,
right.
most common new need nutrient I see people needing that have done these, GLP-1s is to rebuild the pancreas with a like a pancreatrophin or a product like that that's a rebuilding material for the pancreas to get it back to proper healthy function,
Right.
damage control.
Well, definitely, and because
Mhm.
we've had Dr. Crippen on this podcast before talking about other things, but he gave a whole talk for our mastermind group about how it increases pancreatitis 9 times if you're on
Ouch.
these drugs,
Mhm.
or gastroparesis 4 times, or bowel obstructions 4 times, and so you do need to help protect against that, right? With ways to protect your pancreas and everything as well. So when I have somebody who he was just going to do it no matter what. I do offer them Paraplex as a means to help protect their
Mhm.
thyroid and their pancreas. That's a
Hmm.
standard process product. That is the protomorphogen that helps with the thyroid, the adrenals, and the pancreas, right? So that is
Hmm.
protective. And then I definitely tell them they need to do hypothalamus, PMG, or neuroplex, which if you
Hmm.
do look it up, it does talk about appetite regulation because of the hypothalamus support that's in there
Nice.
for you who are out
Yeah.
there, right? So if somebody is on it, I always think, okay, if you're going to do that, okay, but protect your pancreas, protect your thyroid, protect your hypothalamus. And then the other thing is they're probably going to start being deficient on protein, right?
Mm.
When people do these drugs, they lose more muscle than they do fat, right?
Mm.
It's the muscle weight that they're losing weight with. And I think a lot of that's due to them just not eating enough protein because they've lost their appetite for protein or lost their appetite in general. So
Okay.
I'm very big about making sure that they're doing something to at least get amino acids into them to protect
Okay.
that, the muscle wasting or
Hmm.
some type of, even if it's a smoothie with, some type of a protein powder. This is the case where I would want to do that. What are your,
Right. Well, just for the doctors that are listening, Wally Schmidt created the ammonia sniff test. So ammonia is the metabolic byproduct of the body breaking itself down for energy. And so if the person's deficient in protein, smelling ammonia, like Windex, if you will, is going to take them out, so to speak. So they'll get weak, conditionally, functionally weak. I mean, I had years ago, my associate and his wife were helping us do kind of a work day at the office and clean things up. And the gal was cleaning with Windex and just went down for the count for like 2 hours. And she turned out to be very protein deficient, and so that was a profound ammonia sniff test. I have an ammonia vial that I use to test for protein deficiency. So yeah, I mean, it's aptly stated that, make sure, as you're reducing calories, make sure you're keeping the protein up because you lose, like you said, at least 50% of the weight loss is muscle. And then when they go off the, GLP-1 or they go back to normal life or, start coming back, 100% of it is fat, so they lose 50% muscle and then gain 100% fat. And that's that chronic yo-yo that I grew up around, the Weight Watcher era of, the crazy yo-yo diets and the calorie restrictive diets and things that just have such upside, detrimental consequences of just making it impossible to maintain weight because it gets worse every time doing it that way.
right. And I think we're going to see all kinds of devastating things coming down the pipe from the abuse of these drugs for sure.
Hmm.
And I
Right.
think we need to be ready to be able to help people recover and heal from that. And
Hmm.
so I think overall, for the practitioners listening out there, or anybody who's thinking about doing these faux zempics or have patients who are taking faux zempics or ozempics, whatever they are, I think that the takeaway is not to lose, like you said, the story that your body's trying to tell you based
Hmm.
on where you're gaining the weight and just in general that something needs to change in your life. And it's not just adding in an ozempic or a faux zempic. You have to do the other pieces. Otherwise, the consequences are just going to be too great at some point.
Great summary. Really, it's so weight is a sign. It's a sign that you're making chronically bad choices. Unfortunately, sorry those of you that are dealing with it, but learn. I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow. But there is no simple solution. I mean, sorry, but it's like sin, right? It's exciting. It looks fun up front, but there are long-term consequences when we stumble, right? And so weight is like meal by meal choices. So it starts with your next meal. See how you felt, see how you feel afterwards, because your body's telling you every minute of the day. Barry Sears, back in the early days, wrote a book. I mean, one of his best lines was, "You're only as good as your last meal." And I really live by that. I want to be my best so that what I eat next is going to get me there.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, we could talk for days and days and days about all the things about weight loss, but at the end of the day, we know that there's going to be all kinds of new, exciting, over-marketed things. So that's
Right.
why we'll be here. If you really want us to break it down specifically, we don't want to pick on products, but we definitely want to give you the truth about what we see in these products, right?
Yes.
When I can see some benefit, but I can also see some concern, right? It wouldn't be definitely a long-term solution at all.
False hope.
False hope. Exactly. What we're looking at here. Yep. So great. Thanks, Dr. V. We'll keep it nice and sweet
Dustin.
today. For those of you who want more help on the weight loss frontier, if you want to keep us having more and more conversations, we're definitely going to be happy to be a little more in depth over all the options that are needed out there. because we want to make sure that you're supported in what your goals are and making sure we're giving you the truth and not just a bunch of crazy hype. Right.
Or trends.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.